NASA versus SpaceX. Who's winning the space race? For more than half a century, space has been the ultimate frontier of human ambition. It is where science meets imagination, where engineering challenges the limits of physics, and where nations and visionaries compete to leave their mark beyond Earth. For decades, one name stood above all others in this arena: NASA. The United States Space Agency put humans on the moon, built space shuttles, launched legendary telescopes, and turned science fiction into reality. But today, a new name dominates headlines, launch schedules, and public fascination: SpaceX. A private company founded by a billionaire entrepreneur with a bold promise to make humanity a multi-planet species. This raises a powerful and controversial question: NASA versus SpaceX. Who's winning the space race? Is this even the right way to frame the story? Is space still a race, or has it become something entirely new? One is a government agency backed by public funding and decades of legacy. The other is a private company driven by profit, innovation, and speed. One represents national exploration and long-term science. The other represents disruption, reusability, and commercial ambition. Tonight, we're going deep into this rivalry. We'll explore history, technology, missions, budgets, failures, successes, and the future of space itself. By the end of this video, you may see the space race in a completely different way. This is NASA versus SpaceX, and this is the modern space race. To understand where we are today, we need to go back to where it all began. NASA was born in 1958 at the height of the Cold War. The Soviet Union had just shocked the world by launching Sputnik, the first artificial satellite. Space was no longer just a dream. It was a strategic battleground. The United States responded by creating NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, with one mission: ensure American leadership in space. What followed was one of the most extraordinary periods in human history. In just over a decade, NASA went from launching basic rockets to landing humans on the moon. The Apollo program remains one of the greatest engineering achievements of all time. Millions of people watched as astronauts walked on lunar soil, proving that humans could leave Earth and survive on another world. For decades after Apollo, NASA continued to push boundaries. The Space Shuttle program made spaceflight reusable, at least in theory, and enabled the construction of the International Space Station. NASA launched probes that visited every planet in our solar system. Telescopes like Hubble changed our understanding of the universe. Mars rovers turned a distant red dot into a real explored world. NASA became synonymous with space exploration itself. But there was a problem. NASA was slow, it was expensive, and it was deeply tied to politics. Budgets changed with administrations. Programs were canceled after billions had already been spent. Innovation often took a back seat to safety, bureaucracy, and public accountability. Every launch had to be nearly perfect, because failure wasn't just technical, it was political. By the early 2000s, cracks were showing. The space shuttle was aging and dangerous. Two tragic disasters, Challenger and Columbia, killed astronauts and shook public confidence. The shuttle was eventually retired in 2011, leaving the United States without the ability to launch its own astronauts into space. For the first time in decades, NASA had to rely on Russian rockets to reach the International Space Station. That moment marked a turning point. While NASA was struggling with budgets and aging infrastructure, something unexpected was happening in California. In 2002, Elon Musk founded SpaceX with a radical idea. Spaceflight didn't have to be slow, expensive, and exclusive. Musk believed rockets could be built like software, iterated quickly, tested often, and improved through failure. Most importantly, he believed rockets could be reused. At the time, many experts dismissed SpaceX as unrealistic. The space industry was dominated by massive government contractors. Rockets were meant to be thrown away after one use. Reusability was seen as impractical, even dangerous. But SpaceX didn't care about tradition. The company's early years were brutal. Rockets failed, money nearly ran out. The first 3 Falcon 1 launches failed, pushing SpaceX to the edge of bankruptcy. One more failure, and the company would have collapsed. Then on the 4th attempt, Falcon 1 reached orbit. That single success changed everything. Soon after, NASA awarded SpaceX a contract to resupply the International Space Station. This was revolutionary. For the first time, NASA was trusting a private company with a mission once reserved for governments. It wasn't just outsourcing, it was a philosophical shift. SpaceX began moving at a pace NASA simply couldn't match. Falcon 9 launches became frequent. Rockets landed themselves back on Earth, standing upright like science fiction come to life. Costs dropped dramatically. Launch cadence increased. What once took years now took months or weeks. And in 2020, SpaceX achieved something historic. For the first time since the space shuttle's retirement, astronauts launched from American soil aboard an American spacecraft. The Crew Dragon mission marked NASA's return to human spaceflight, but the rocket belonged to SpaceX. This moment symbolized the new reality of space exploration. NASA was no longer the sole driver. SpaceX had become essential. So who was actually winning? To answer that, we need to define what winning means. If the space race of the 1960s was about national pride and beating a rival to the moon, today's space race is far more complex. It's about cost, speed, sustainability, science, exploration, and the future of humanity itself. NASA's strength lies in science and long-term exploration. The agency runs missions that don't make money and never will. It sends probes to study distant asteroids, icy moons, and the early universe. It builds observatories like the James Webb Space Telescope, projects that require decades of planning and international cooperation. SpaceX, on the other hand, is focused on infrastructure. It builds rockets like Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy to lower the cost of access to space. It launches thousands of Starlink satellites to create a global internet network. And it is developing Starship, the most powerful rocket ever built, with the explicit goal of reaching Mars. NASA asks questions, SpaceX builds highways. When it comes to innovation speed, SpaceX clearly has the advantage. NASA must justify every decision to governments, auditors, and the public. SpaceX can test, fail, explode, and try again, sometimes within days. This rapid iteration has allowed SpaceX to leap ahead in reusability and launch frequency. But speed isn't everything. NASA operates under a different set of responsibilities. Human lives, public trust, and international treaties all factor into its decisions. When NASA launches a mission, it must succeed. Failure can set programs back years. This difference in culture creates tension, but also synergy. NASA relies on SpaceX for transportation. SpaceX relies on NASA for funding, expertise, and credibility. Without NASA contracts, SpaceX might not have survived its early years. Without SpaceX, NASA would still be dependent on foreign launch providers. This is not a simple rivalry. It's a partnership wrapped in competition. Nowhere is this clearer than in the race back to the moon. NASA's Artemis program aims to return humans to the lunar surface and establish a sustainable presence there. Unlike Apollo, Artemis is not about planting a flag and leaving. It's about building infrastructure, space stations, lunar bases, and long-term exploration. And who is building the lunar lander? SpaceX. NASA selected a modified version of Starship to land astronauts on the moon. This decision was controversial, but it showed just how deeply SpaceX is now embedded in NASA's future. If Artemis succeeds, it will be NASA's mission, but SpaceX's vehicle. Then there's Mars. NASA has explored Mars more than any other world beyond Earth. Its rovers have revolutionized planetary science, but NASA has no funded plan to send humans to Mars anytime soon. SpaceX does. Elon Musk has repeatedly stated that Mars is the ultimate goal. Starship is designed specifically for interplanetary travel. Massive, fully reusable, and capable of carrying dozens of people, Starship represents SpaceX's vision of a multi-planet civilization. Whether that vision is realistic remains uncertain. Starship is still in development, explosions are frequent, timelines are optimistic. But progress is undeniable. NASA thinks in decades. SpaceX thinks in deadlines, so who's ahead? In raw launch numbers, SpaceX dominates. It launches more rockets than any organization in history. In cost per kilogram to orbit, SpaceX has shattered previous records. In reusability, no one comes close. But NASA still leads in deep space science. No private company is building a James Webb Space Telescope. No private company is running planetary science programs at NASA's scale. SpaceX may be winning the race to orbit. NASA is winning the race to knowledge. The real answer may be that there is no single winner. The modern space race is not about beating a rival nation. It's about transforming space from an unreachable frontier into a working environment. NASA and SpaceX are playing different roles in the same story. SpaceX does. Elon Musk has repeatedly stated that Mars is the ultimate goal. Starship is designed specifically for interplanetary travel. Massive, fully reusable, and capable of carrying dozens of people, Starship represents SpaceX's vision of a multi-planet civilization. Whether that vision is realistic remains uncertain. Starship is still in development, explosions are frequent, timelines are optimistic. But progress is undeniable. NASA thinks in decades. SpaceX thinks in deadlines, so who's ahead? In raw launch numbers, SpaceX dominates. It launches more rockets than any organization in history. In cost per kilogram to orbit, SpaceX has shattered previous records. In reusability, no one comes close. But NASA still leads in deep space science. No private company is building a James Webb Space Telescope. No private company is running planetary science programs at NASA's scale. SpaceX may be winning the race to orbit. NASA is winning the race to knowledge. The real answer may be that there is no single winner. The modern space race is not about beating a rival nation. It's about transforming space from an unreachable frontier into a working environment. NASA and SpaceX are playing different roles in the same story.